Welcome to Crunching Data, where we go behind the scenes with the data leaders who keep it all flowing. We're talking real stories, real challenges, and the future of data from the people building it. This is Crunching Data, a podcast brought to you by Matia, the unified data ops platform. Let's get into today's episode.
This is Benjamin Segal. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Matia, a unified data operation platform. And today we have the pleasure of hosting Jacob Bedard, a distinguished data and analytics leader with over 16 years of experience in the field. He has held significant role, including serving as head of data at OpenBorder. In addition to his leadership at OpenBorder, Jacob contributed his expertise at Apollo Insurance, Dialpad, Hootsuite, and many more. Jacob, thank you for joining us today. At this point, I'm extremely happy to call you not just a data leader, but also a good friend. Feel free to intro yourself a bit, if you don't mind sharing what you do today and maybe a bit about your background in the data space.
Sure. Background-wise, initially I wanted to become a history professor, but that was first year of university. I took my first economics course and then I decided, okay, I'm getting into finance. So thankfully made a switch there. It worked out pretty well for me. Started my career in finance as a financial analyst, and then I eventually expanded to other types of analytics. And then in just a couple of years, I wound up switching fully over into data analytics. So focusing on some of the things that were just starting to happen in machine learning. Deep learning was just starting to bubble up at that point. So it was a very interesting time to make the switch. So switched over and never looked back. And I've been doing data for about 15 years or so. That was initially as an individual contributor, but I've actually spent the overwhelming majority of my time as a leader in data analytics. Most recently, I've made the move over into contracting and consulting though. So I get to go back to being an individual contributor and being leader of projects rather than teams, which I'm really enjoying actually. So it's been a really, really nice switch.
What is I know you a bit from time back at Pangea, and I think even when you were a leader, you always like to go deep dive and make sure that you have a full understanding of what's going on always. So it's kind of like amazing to see people that can go in macro and micro. Most people, sit in either leadership or IC and being able to go up and down. Something I admire, again, knowing you for quite a bit of time. I know you're working on quite a bit of project and wondering what kind of like keeps you up at night and issues is or things that you're finding or challenges. I don't know if issues is the right term.
With most of my projects, I'm finding getting processes and systems to work together properly so that you can really analyze real world activity well. That's always the hardest part. So a lot of the projects that I tend to work on, it's ostensibly a data project, but really you're doing a lot of work on, changing their CRMs and other connected systems, and then changing processes that the businesses that I'm working with are following in order to complete their business activities. How do we make sure it's trackable? And how do we do that without making a lot of work just for the sake of reporting for the teams as well? So I find that's kind of the trickiest part. And that work, you can always say like, fill this out, fill that out, fill this out. If anything's not optional, you got to make sure that you're not making the process more complicated. And if it is optional, people are just going to skip it. So that's I think the toughest balance is how do you actually get all of the aspects of the business to run well together and make everything reportable and auditable to a high degree.
Would you say that when you say processes today and data, would you say it's more so a people challenge of like getting people aligned into processes and understanding ROI or return on investment on specific data projects, or more so, there is data things that are not running and we need to convince people to even pay attention to those?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, like I always say, sometimes to an annoying extent, with people I work with, if you don't record it, we can't report it. So if you simply have not captured a piece of information that you can't infer or deduce downstream, like it's gone, your ability to report on that is come and gone. Like you're never getting that data now, right? I think that's a big part of it, right? Like, do your systems actually capture the data that's necessary to do the kind of analytics that you want to do? And then making sure that you assess what is it you want to actually be able to report on, what do you want to see about the business, and are you capturing enough data to actually be able to answer those? And then, where everybody thinks all the work is the data work in between, but really it's the getting the data in the first place, and making sure that it's quality and that it represents real world activity. That's So yeah, it's process and system, but usually upstream from data. The data stuff tends to be the easier part.
I won't say everyone will agree on that, but maybe on your ability to solve technical issues make it a bit easier. This it leads me to some AI stuff, and we're not going to go too deep into AI, but you've seen a lot of that. You see some things that are real. Also, there is a lot of hype. I'm wondering, what do you think is the misconception about AI in data? I did not see yet the breakthrough. Like, I see a lot. I see everyday new things. But what do you think is the biggest misconception people think that might not be relevant in the next few years and would not be solved necessarily with AI?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing that is a problem when you have very authoritative tone being used by a person, right? It's the fact that they sound so correct. And, it's something you see in like academic writing where you want to use that authoritative tone when you're going to make your point. It makes it stick so much more. It sounds so much more convincing. And, these models that people are using, they come up with very convincing answers, like the whole how many R's are there in strawberry thing. We saw that one going around a lot. It doesn't actually know how to pick apart the word strawberry. It's looking at tokens inside the word strawberry. And you may not see each of those R's being broken out as a token based on what tokenizer was used to feed that model. So it can't actually pick that up, but it gives you a very, very convincing answer. So if it's something that's a little more abstract, it's tougher to check, and you kind of just want to trust it rather than dig into it. Kind of like when you have, a direct report doing something, you got to get in there and you got to review it before you can really start to get comfortable with their work. And I think, yeah, the more difficult abstract stuff people are asking AIs to do, the more comfortable they get with using them, and the lower their ability is to mitigate any risks in that AI doing its job incorrectly. I think that's the thing. Like, we're just too comfortable with it because it's too convincing.
Would you say within the data space you have less space for mistakes, and therefore it's not like it's get adopted, but not as adopted I see in production as engineering use things like Cursor and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
they go and review it after in a PR and check it and double check it until it goes into production, etc. I'm wondering, in data we have zero place. I think the beauty and the curse within data is like you have zero place for mistakes. You have a mistake, you lose trust. Very hard to gain the trust again.
Yeah, I think it isn't as widely used. I've definitely seen people using things like ChatGPT to do things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. That I find kind of unnerving. Someone says, "Oh yeah, I can go do this ginger loop or something." If you haven't written one before, don't ask ChatGPT to do it, and then put that into your code and put that into a merge request. You need to know what you're doing. So if you're using it as a way to save yourself time, or to do things that are extremely repetitive and maybe you don't want to go, say, write a loop, there are places where it's handy. But you really have to know if it's safe to offload a piece of work to AI. And are you using it as a guide and a helper, or are you using it as a crutch? And I think because what these things are today, I mean, we say AI, it's a transformer model. They're all generative transformers of some sort. They're basically just predicting the next word in the response as it goes. Sort of like those Warner Brother cartoons where you might see one of the characters on a train car, it's on the front and it's putting down the track as the train is moving. And it's kind of like how this thing's working when it's putting together its response. And then if you see them do the real-time output, it'll say a sentence and then the sentence will disappear and then pop back up as it's constantly readjusting to not just forward-looking and backward-looking context as it's scanning its own knowledge base, but as it's also looking at the response that it's generating too, sort of just making it up on the fly, right? So yeah, the fact that these things aren't that structured, I think that's the risk. That's something that people haven't really come to appreciate yet. Like, for example, if I drop something off of a tower, it's got a certain density and a certain weight, it's a certain size, there's a certain amount of wind, I'm at a certain level of elevation, so is the bottom of the building. How fast is that thing going to get to the ground? There's a very clear way to figure that out, right? I want to use an existing algorithm and formula for this, but GPTs, they don't do that. Everything is statistical, right? So I think before these things become really useful, we're going to have to combine the natural language processing elements of them with more routine functions. Kind of like what you see in, A lot of people will probably laugh if they hear me talk about Wolfram Alpha, but Wolfram Alpha has been doing this for a really, really long time. And they've taken a more programmatic, deterministic, functional approach to understanding language in terms of symbols. And it does an amazing job of actually understanding what your question is when you go to Wolfram Alpha and ask it a question. And then it goes and applies specific functions in order to accomplish that task. And if it doesn't know how to do it, it's not going to like take a crack at it like a generative transformer will. And it's certainly not going to come back and give you this authoritative, basically BS. So there's definitely going to be some changes there before we're going to see more usage of it in the data space. It has to be more controlled and functional.
I agree with you. Now, looking at you, you've been in quite a bit of companies. You've seen a lot. You're seeing more now, like even as a consultant working in multiple companies. What would you say is kind of like North Star metric for data team success? You've seen data team success and you've seen data team failures. And for the ones you saw as a successful teams, what do you think was the thing that kept them going and being successful at what they do over time?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It's a tough one. Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, and maybe it's just because I don't have perspective on it, having been in data leadership for a while. It's funny, you can measure everybody else's team quantitatively and gauge their performance with data, but with the data team, it's really hard to come up with a quantitative measure of performance. But I mean, if there is one that you could come up with, I would say it would probably be the percentage of your time that you spend on producing regularly recurring reporting. And that's a huge measure of maturity of the team. I think that's probably, of anything you could put into a measure, that's probably the most important one, in my opinion. Have you automated away the things that have become rote and standard? And are you freeing yourself up for the very high value, difficult questions that aren't going to be asked every single month?
You know, those you talked about difficult questions. We see a lot of analytical teams that just build dashboards and ton of dashboards, and we actually seen it quite a lot. And you've seen it way more than me over time, where a team build 100 dashboards and use only 10. So I'm wondering, how do you show business impact for business people? How do you make sure that the business side understand that data is not just dashboarding, and data is something way bigger?
The strongest thing that I've seen is the investors. They provide the strongest incentive for better analytics. So if you're a company with a business model that is at least similar to a class of others, so if you're in software as a service or platform as a service or anything you could sensibly put your company into a certain category, you're going in, you're reporting to the board of the company, they are probably going to want to see some standardized metrics coming out of your company. They want to get consistent answers. When you tell them, hey, this is what February 2023 looked like in terms of this metric, and then you come back 1 quarter later, do that board meeting again, they don't want to see February 2023 moving around. And I find it's usually the board that is driving the top leadership at a lot of companies to improve their analytics, because they want to really get a better understanding of what's going on at the company. I think it's easy for everyone to get lost in the day-to-day. It's easy for people to pick up a lot of that tribal knowledge. I use this spreadsheet to understand what's going on with bookings. Or, oh yeah, this is where we have our account territories mapped. It's in a doc, a Google Doc, or something like that. And you've got a lot of people who just have way too much in their heads that they're not really able to share effectively with other people. And I think when that becomes a pain point, that's usually the strongest business case for improving your analytics and growing your analytics team, or investing in new products or something like that. So opening up new capabilities, being able to answer new questions that you couldn't answer or answer faithfully or reliably before.
Some data leader, they want more resources. Would you say most of them won't be able to go to the board, etc.? Maybe they can convince that the board will be happy with the results. Would you say going and building the value yourself, or like showing something up? Or I'm trying to think of like teams where there is no much respect for data. What's my best way of proving that?
Yeah, well, you have to have a good picture of the problem that you're going to solve first. I think that's the most important thing. There have been a number of times where I've inherited a team that didn't have a lot of trust with the other departments. And that's always the first thing to restore. So if someone says, hey, I'm getting this, visitor conversion rate metric, when you're talking to GTM and the marketing teams, they're usually the ones that have the most. to complain about because it is a very complex world, I think, and it is not easy to get those data streams in and to interpret them properly. And then, of course, you've also got a lot of people using tools that are producing a lot of their own analytics. So you have people comparing their amplitude and their mixed panel versus their GA, but they're all set up in a totally different way. And you say, oh, who's looking after Tag Manager? I don't know. It's like, well, of course it's different. Like, you don't even know who's.
So much noise, you don't know what attribution is, what are touch points, you have no idea what's going on here.
Yeah. So I was like, you have to make sure that they're supposed to be like for like before you start going and comparing things. And I think that's, just the sheer multitude of tools that people have available that are pumping out data that tends to cause a lot of issues. The question reports, and the reports might actually be more accurate than what they're looking at from their system that has a bunch of pre-baked reports, for example. And they say, well, I don't have the same totals. And I think it's when, they have issues like the data team is unable to explain exactly what the differences are between two reports and why they actually shouldn't match. Those sorts of things build up. You don't have a lot of trust, or sometimes people just aren't able to do certain reports or breakdowns or dashboards. And then you come in and you take a look at, okay, well, what are the actual blockers to getting those built? And then you have to do the stakeholder interviews first. Everything should start with that. I should have started my whole tirade with that, actually. So start with the stakeholder interview, understand the pain points, and then make sure that what you're proposing is really about solving it, not, hey, I really want this technology and it's going to solve your problem. Let me try and connect these two cases somehow, which you see a lot of, especially in more engineering-led companies. They're all over the tools, and it's putting the cart before the horse. And I think that's the biggest problem. Like that'll if you just want to start with the tool, you're toast. You have to start with the business problem.
And I think you've seen that quite a lot. I think I'm going to ask you one or two more questions. Don't want to take much more of your time, but some interesting questions. I don't think you did many mistakes in your life, but I think some maybe shaped you. So I'm wondering if you can share about like one mistakes that you think, in data strategy specifically, that shape how you lead today. Something that you've done maybe wrong and you think shaped you in the way you take decision today from a data strategy perspective.
Luckily, I'm one of those people who's just got a very, very high aversion to publishing things that may be incorrect. It scares me to death, which is not so good for my mental health, but it does cause me to say, okay, it's not quite ready. I need to put this out. It's almost production, but let's consider this the QA period. And I have a lot of issues that pop up then during those initial phases. But I think what I've learned is to just set the expectation that, okay, we need time to observe this because, well, that's what QA is for. It's the problems that you couldn't have anticipated, and you want to get as many eyes on things as possible. So I think, maybe earlier on in my career, there were probably a smattering of smaller mistakes, but they all seem pretty mortal to me. I think, a whole collection of smaller mistakes has kind of led to a very pragmatic view of how analytics should be done. It's that trust, the transparency, the robustness, the accuracy, timeliness. Those are the most important things about data.
I think that's last question. And then if you have any questions or things you want to ask as well, I'm more than happy to share from my end. But the last question I have is related to the future. And, we don't know what the future holds, but I'm wondering, what do you think is the most underrated data role, or what will be the most underrated data role in the next few years? And if someone, go out of college today, what would you recommend them to do if they want to be in the data space? What do you think they should focus on in the process?
Yeah, kind of like we were talking about earlier, the most underserved area in analytics is the intersection with source systems and business processes. So we've seen data science explode, and it's gotten so advanced, right? We've got Llama 405B and Llama 90B, these crazy models where you can just put a picture in and say, tell me what's going on in here, or put a unicorn in the background. Like, it's insane how far these neural nets have come. So that's gotten very deep, I think quite mature, very, very specialized. We have cars driving themselves now. That's all deep learning. And then we saw data engineering start to pick up, and the rise of the analytics engineer, tools like dbt becoming sort of a gold standard. I've adopted it myself in the last couple of years, as we've worked in dbt instances before, and that's starting to get pretty mature. But I think the most underserved area is where you actually have the collection and everything around the collection of the data being determined. And that is usually where the biggest disconnect is. So if your data team and your business teams aren't working very well together, I find it's that. How do you get real world activity reflected properly in your source systems so that you can even think about doing analytics? So something in that realm, a role where maybe there's a little bit more advanced tooling available that helps them bridge that gap a little better. They're coming out of school or program educated with a little bit more general business knowledge and system architecture and system design, I think. So that's something that is kind of over in the software engineering space, but we really need a role that's kind of half data, half business with that software engineering, some level of software engineering expertise.
Interesting. Anything else I didn't ask you that you want to share?
Well, I think there was the one other thing. There was one of the questions that we put onto the potential like loose agenda, right? And it was a data myth that I wish would die, right? And I was thinking about that earlier today, and I really got to say, streaming data, 999 times out of 1,000, you don't need to stream data from your source system to your destination. Usually it's just going to be a batch. But yeah, too often I'm still like talking to data engineers.
You still encounter it quite a bit, right? Like people that just want faster without understanding the real need on the other side.
Yeah, and then you have like a lot of data influencers. Like now there are data engineering influencers, which
it's crazy, no? I see people with 500,000 followers. I'm like, that's crazy.
I never would have expected that would be a thing. But we have these people saying you have to learn Apache Kafka if you want to be a data engineer and stuff like that. No, you don't. The vast majority of it
might be relevant, like in the big companies, like if you're a data engineer in Walmart in like a heavy infrastructure, but in the 99% of the companies.
There are applications for it for sure, and if it's what you need, it's what you need. But when someone's saying, okay, I got to get this running through a Kafka so I can stream it over to my warehouse and get it into the QBR and have it update live, you got to stop and say, do you know what QBR means? You don't need to stream data into this thing. It's a quarterly report. Let's take it easy here. I think you can't let yourself get too comfortable and run away with tools again, which I guess kind of goes back to that other theme we were talking about. So yeah, I guess that was another take that I wanted to share, I suppose.
Super. I agree with you, and I think you have to look at what the end goal is before you start. And I think it's true for engineering. I think in data, people sometimes lost it, maybe because of the modern data stack, and other reason that so much is available and a lot of marketing is involved in selling you. Like I really appreciate the time. The only thing I would say for whoever is watching us, Jacob is phenomenal. I don't know how available are you? I know you're pretty busy, but I know Jacob is phenomenal from data engineering perspective. So if you ever get into issues, questions around data and you need any help, if Jacob is available, I would always recommend Jacob.
You're too kind. Thank you very much, Ben.
This was Crunching Data, brought to you by Matia. Thank you, Jacob, again. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me on. See ya.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Crunching Data, brought to you by Matia, the unified data ops platform. You can find us at matia.io.